Kenya, the country's Parliamentary Transport Committee has recommended something a little interesting, shall we say. It's recommended the nationalization of Kenya Airways if it's to overturn its fortunes. Now, the lawmakers want the government to create an aviation holding company with 4 wholly owned subsidiaries that include the carrier itself, one of Africa's 3 biggest carriers, and the country's main airport, Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. Now, the other 2 entities will be the Kenya Airports Authority and an aviation college. Kenya Airways has been losing market share for years now to regional rivals like Ethiopian Airlines, currently the continent's biggest carrier, and RwandAir is currently seeking ways to promote its base in the East African nation's capital of Nairobi as a regional hub and to return to profitability, even if, apparently, that means going back into the hands of the government. So effectively, what's the rationale for going back to the 90s? The last time KQ was actually a government-owned entity, I was in primary school. Let's examine this with George Bodo. He's a director at Call Street. He's with me in studio right now. What are your initial impressions?
It's a bad move.
Bad is an understatement.
I know. I think that for me, it's a very dicey situation. Mm-hmm. On the one hand, you have government that is constantly intervening to prop up a business. But I guess if you could extend your thoughts around that, you could say that in the history of fiscal economics, governments tend to prop up economy in terms of when there's a boom and bust situation. So when the economy goes down, then the fiscal policy comes in to say, okay, fine, what do you need to do? Can we expand to prop up businesses, let them level up, but then you can give them to the market?
But strictly speaking, though, I mean, in this specific instance, because looking at every single press conference I've seen Michael Joseph and the CEO, Sebastian Mikosh, talking, and they keep saying, look, we're working on turning this company around, and they've proven it to a large extent because the losses that we're looking at in terms of the nominal size has been reducing year after year after year. There is a case to be made for just letting the management and the board do their job instead of trying to tinker with things all over the place.
Well, there's always a government discount in every company where the government is a majority shareholder, for the simple reason that government is always trying to interfere with the business at any point. And we've seen this historically with all entities where the government has say in terms of shareholding. For the kind of things, you could say that the amount of intervention that the government has given Kenya Airways from debt underwritings, we are now talking about debt underwriting to the tune of about $750 million.
Correct.
Debt underwriting, collateral support. I think it makes sense for them to nationalize it from that perspective. But again, the biggest question is, why is government renationalizing Kenya Airways? The answer could be that Kenya Airways is a strategic important asset to the country. Well, the truth is that it's not. Kenya Airways is not a strategic asset. And that really tag is overplayed, because I say that when I look at other aviation markets, like for instance, a classical case is Dubai. Yeah. There's a strong, if you look at, it's difficult to separate Dubai and Emirates, for instance, and it is historical because they have a blueprint to turn Dubai into a hub, a redistribution hub, and to a large extent they've done that. If you look at the numbers that they're handling in terms of redistributing passengers. Yeah. Now, such a strategy, such a blueprint, makes it Emirates as an airline such an important aspect of it that they have to make sure they do everything possible.
So if I understand
now, if you translate that to Kenya,
are you basically arguing that Kenya can do without KQ?
They can. First of all, for us to say Kenya Airways is a national strategic asset, would you have a blueprint around tourism? For instance, if you go to things like Vision 2030, it doesn't mention Kenya Airways as a pillar to tourism. Now, Vision 2030 has been overtaken by Big Four agenda. Now, where does that leave Kenya Airways? So essentially, renationalizing Kenya Airways and additional financial support, for me, it's just a waste of taxpayer money.
It's throwing good money after bad, effectively. From a cash perspective, though, because just running a quick back of the envelope calculation on this, in order to buy out the remaining bits of KQ shares that it doesn't own, the state would have to shell out somewhere between 110 to almost 24.
It's just slightly over
$240 million, give or take.
So it's
depending on the price.
Just slightly $100 million in terms of buying to buy other equity holders.
Well, yeah, but would you
and an additional $250 million in debt?
Well, yeah, there's that. But would you actually sell out at this particular point? Because the price today was what, 3 shillings 50 something cents. So at that level, it's 110. Yeah. But most of these banks agree to convert their shares at about closer to 8 shillings a share. So in essence, if they're going to do this, it's going to cost them a lot more than that 200 and something million dollars that we're talking about. You're looking at an effective price of $500 or so million. Worth it?
It's not worth it. I mean, the basic principle of capitalism is if an entity, a business entity, cannot catch up with market dynamics, then it's very simple. The entity has to go natural way. Now, this issue of government, for instance, the government of Kenya coming up and say, oh, this is a national strategic asset, this is a key resource for the country, let's sink in taxpayer money. There's no business case in my view. Yeah.
One last question for you, because looking at the committee reports, and this was really bizarre, because the first recommendation is nationalized KQ. But then they proceed to say that we need to give this entity a range of tax concessions on the Income Tax Act, on import declaration fees, excise duty, VAT.
I mean, it makes, look at all those you're listing, the tax rebates that they've lined up to give Kenya Airways. It makes the thing even more expensive. Now, apart from those tax rebates, when you nationalize an airline like Kenya Airways, then you also, apart from the tax rebates, you also need to give ring fencing mechanism, protect, for instance, the aviation business, say, and if you look at other markets, say that we limit the number of slots we can give other airlines, because you're going full throttle on a protection mechanism.
Or basically give
but
them
if you,
cheaper landing slots.
yes, if you leave it at that point, tax rebates, but you still have open skies policy, then it doesn't make sense. It's you're stepping on the accelerator, but at the same time you're stepping on the brake.
It's a bizarre event.
Let's see how it turns out.
Well, you're more polite than I would be, but thank you for that. George Bodo from Call Street. We'll leave it there for